to Belize during the Sunday school hour. Okay? Why don't you give them a hand and welcome them?
All right, if you want to hand that mic to Valley, I'm going to call her up in just a minute. But I just want to say that we are glad to be here today, honored to get to spend some time with you. I've known your pastor for a few years now. He's come through Shreveport a few times, and it's just good to get to spend some time here with y'all and to share today what we're doing in Belize. So there's the pictures there. Now, my daughter Elizabeth is kind of shy. I was going to have her help with some of the presentation this morning, and she just really was not feeling it. So she's going to sit there, but you can wave, Lizzie. And then my wife, Valley, she's going to come up in just a minute and help me with a couple of things as well. But we are headed to Belize, and I surrendered to missions in high school, felt that there was a calling from God with that, and then went to Bible college, studied missions, and then after Bible college and church work and different things, we kept pursuing different opportunities, but there was never a clear go to this place. There was never a clear call to leave the country. And so we continued working with churches, pastoring in the States, and the last 3 years we've been on staff at Baptist Tabernacle in Shreveport, Louisiana with Jack Allenbaugh. And he's been up here and preached for y'all at least once before. And so we've been doing that. And to be quite honest, I took it as, hey, God had called me to ministry, but I got the missions thing wrong. And, I had moved on from even thinking about that. And things were going well in Shreveport. Last year, and I know some of y'all heard this yesterday, you were here for the Bible giveaway that we did. But last year, we gave out 2,000 Bibles, going and just setting up a tent with signs in parking lots in Shreveport. We gave out 2,000 Bibles, 220 people, 2,200 Bibles, just over 200 people made a profession of faith last year. And so in my mind, everything's going good. Ministry's going well. I love working with Pastor Allenbaugh. And then God puts this burden on my heart for Belize. And we just had this clear call. I talked to Valley about it. We prayed about it. And then I went to pastor. And again, I was enjoying what was going on and how God had put things together in Shreveport. I knew pastor seemed to be. He hadn't fired me yet. And so I went to pastor to say, hey, I feel God's calling us to leave the country and go to Belize. I wasn't sure how he would respond, but he's not one to hold back what he's thinking. So I knew he'd give me a clear answer, and he was excited. He began praying with us. And then several weeks later, we announced it to Tabernacle. And we've been, since then, quickly putting plans together to get where God's called us to. I recently got back from Belize, made a trip down there, met with some veteran missionaries that are there, and God's just given a clear path for how we're to go and how we're to, expand the work that's already there. And so we'll jump into this. Let's see here. Baptist Tabernacle is our sending church. We're partnering with Central Missionary Clearinghouse in Houston, Texas. All right, so I put together some fun facts about Belize. And when I put this presentation together, I was thinking, hey, if we get asked at some point, to do something for a children's Sunday school class or whatever, something that would be colorful and fun for children. And I showed it to my wife and to my daughter. Elizabeth said it looks like Vacation Bible School, and my wife said, well, adults are just bigger kids. And so I'm going to have Valley come up. She's going to work through these fun facts about Belize, and then we'll go from there. Before we do the fun facts, does anyone already have some information about Belize that you know? Last month I was at a church, and the guy's been down there like 6 times. He knew everything. Anybody have anything they know that they want to share about Belize? All right. Well, then, Valley, that means you get to have some fun facts.
Fun facts? Okay. Am I still on? Yeah. Okay. So the first one.
Not so fun fact first.
Yeah, not so fun fact first.
Gotta get
Right on it?
Yeah.
Gonna eat the microphone. So the first one is there is no McDonald's or Starbucks in Belize. So if that's what you're coming for, you're kind of out of luck there. You don't get any of those. The second one is we have the second largest barrier reef in the world. It stretches over 190 miles. It's a very popular tourist.
Does anyone know where the largest barrier reef is? Do what? Australia, yes.
We don't have any gold stars, so I'd give you one. The next one is Belize has over 200 islands. They're known as keys. They dot the coastline from the top to the bottom. Next, we have the Great Blue Hole. You can see it from space. So we may be little, but part of us can be seen from space.
Might not can see the mainland from space, but you can see that blue hole out in the ocean from
You can see
space.
it. And the last one, we have the highest concentration of Mayan ruins in Central America.
All right.
Is that it?
Thank you, Valley. All right. Appreciate you helping with that. That's her first time with that part of the presentation. Okay, so as I was putting fun facts together, yes, there's all the Mayan ruins, there's the keys, and I hear people talk about, oh yeah, I've been to Belize, and most of the time when people are like, oh, I've been to Belize, it was a cruise ship that was passing by and they stopped and they went over to San Pedro and some of the islands and whatnot. But then as you get into the mainland and then closer to the Guatemalan border, you have all the Mayan ruins, all of that kind of thing. So if you don't know, Belize is in Central America. You've got the ocean on one side, you've got Guatemala on the other there. And Guatemala is fighting to say that it's part of Guatemala. So there's some stuff with that. All right, so people ask me, well, what's the language that is spoken in Belize? Well, English is the official language, and the ministry that we will be working with when we get there is in English. And so that makes that piece easy to start. The other languages that are common, Creole is common. I'm from Louisiana. That's not the same Creole that Louisiana has, but Creole, Spanish, and then there's 3 Mayan dialects and Garifuna. So there is a lot of languages, and most of the people that I met while I was there, they speak at least 3 languages. The area that the work is in, where we'll be starting, is a lot of Hispanic influence, a lot of Spanish. And so when they say that they speak English and Spanish and maybe one of the Mayan dialects, they will kind of fluidly go between. It's not like they say, well, I primarily speak English. I mean, just whoever they're talking to, they just kind of seamlessly work between the 3. All right. And so with that, there's several people groups. Somebody was asking, well, what is the, situation as far as the people in Belize? Well, yes, there's a lot of Hispanic people, and a lot of them come from El Salvador and different places within Central and South America. But there's a lot of Hispanic influence, and that's the Mestizo people. The Garifuna, that is of African and indigenous descent. And then you have the Maya people. And the Maya people, obviously, they're the indigenous people of the land. And I went while I was there with 2 of the guys from the church, and they took me to San Antonich, which is a large Mayan ruins area that we climbed to the top of, and from the top of it I could see over into Guatemala. And so they take me up there, but so much superstition and so much witchcraft that came from that background that they had with the Mayan beliefs, the Mayan religion. The 2 guys that I went with were of Mayan descent. And so, they're telling me, oh, yeah, nobody does the witchcraft stuff anymore. Our grandparents, they were the ones familiar with that, but that's not really happening much. There's still some of that. And the thing is, you don't even recognize how much some of those things influence your thought process. And so there's that. Creole of African descent with English influence, and then East Indians, and that's descents of Indian laborers. And so Belize is a small country with a lot of different people groups represented, and a lot of opportunity there. Belize is one of the most strategic English-speaking mission fields in Central America. And as we go to work in Belize, we see it as a gateway to Central and South America. It's open to the gospel, and it's positioned for having a major impact, not just in the borders of Belize, but throughout Guatemala and in Central America as well. What is the need in Belize? So many of the areas have little consistent gospel witness. There's been a lot of, because of the access, it's easy to get to, and because you can get there and speak English when you arrive, there's been a lot of short-term mission trips going down and just doing street evangelism. Not a lot of people that have stayed and made disciples. And so there's a knowledge and obviously a Catholic background. And so there's a knowledge about Christianity in terms, Christian terms, but there's not consistent gospel witness, and there's not a lot of people that have really a seriousness to their Christian life. You know, well, I'm Christian because my parents were Catholic or my grandparents were Catholic. I'm Christian because, you know, somebody told me about Jesus one time, but they're not actively living out the Christian life as a whole throughout the country. So there's a shortage of trained pastors and leaders. One of the issues with that is even where there are churches and pastors that are doing what they can, there's bad doctrine, you know, because of a lack of training with leadership. The people are open to the gospel, but again, much of them are unreached and undiscipled. And like I said, there's a huge opportunity, both nationally and regionally, for the gospel. So our focus is going to be on evangelism, discipleship, and leadership training. And as, you know, God called us to Belize, and at that point, you know, we're asking God, well, why? You know, we don't even know much about Belize. When we started doing some research, started talking to people that were there, that had been there, missionaries that had come back home, but that were there, you know, they just kept telling us the big thing that is needed is discipleship, consistency, leadership training. And I was like, wait, that sounds like all the stuff that God's been having me work on the last 3 years with Pastor Alan Ball there in Shreveport. And so we're excited to get to have that influence in Belize. Evangelism, we're wanting to do street evangelism and, you know, even like what we were doing yesterday, but then also soccer is a good thing to use to get people's attention, to get kids to come do Bible studies with soccer. Also with martial arts, my daughter, she may look quiet and, you know, calm over there, but she's a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo. And so doing some martial arts classes with kids and then doing Bible studies, that kind of thing, just to do outreach. And then discipleship, there's no, you know, quick way to do discipleship. It takes one-on-one. It takes building relationships, small group ministries, that kind of thing. And then also, it's not just that we want to, you know, have a church there, but we want to develop leaders that will, you know, take over the churches, and then even developing teachers and missionaries to go into other parts of Central America. So that's our focus there. The strategy is from one place to many. So this is a picture of the work that's currently there, the church in the Valley of Peace. And the missionary that's there, we'll be going down initially, helping them, strengthening that work. But from that central part of the country, we'll reach out to Belmopan, which is the capital, and then Belize City. Belize City has the largest population of people in the country. And then from there, we will expand to Guatemala and to Central America. You say, well, that's a lot. I thought you were a missionary to Belize, and now you're wanting to take on, you know, Central America. We're building a team. You know, our vision for it isn't for the three of us to go down there and do it alone, but we're building a team to go with us and to plant churches throughout the country. And Global Surge is a ministry that I work closely with. We're going to be making a trip at some point at the latter part of the year. I'm going to make a trip to Manila, Philippines, but there's right now over 500 Filipino missionaries that have surrendered to missions outside of the Philippines, and they're going through their Bible training and all of that. And I'm going to recruit some team members to come and to help us to do church planning in Belize. And so pray for that, that God would direct as we build out a team. Why are we going? because God's clear leading. I mean, I knew a lot about countries in South America. I've been to the Philippines a few times. There's a lot of countries that I had a lot more information about than Belize. And then literally God hit us with this burden for Belize, and we couldn't explain it. I sat in pastor's office a couple of times. I'm like, Pastor, I don't understand why God's called us to Belize, but we'll go if that's where he wants us. And Pastor said, sometimes that's how God works. It was just, okay, that's not a big deal. That's how God works. And so we're going because God has given us this burden to reach the people of Belize and then to train leaders and to see that multiplied throughout the country. How can you be involved? I don't have to go into great detail on how to be involved at a church where the pastor is so connected with missions. You can say, well, this is the missionary thing. We need prayer, obviously, for open doors for souls to be saved, for protection and wisdom, and then also giving. And you're like, oh, there's that missionary asking for money. But it's the monthly support of churches and individuals that allows us to go and to have our work there. So monthly support, one-time gifts. Here's a few pictures that I took while I was there. And so this was at the market in San Ignacio. That was after the youth service, and they're Baptist like us. We had the donuts this morning. We got to have some good food there. There's some of the kids. This is a group of young adults that are in leadership training right now in that church. And I am now going to ask if anyone has any questions. Yes, sir.
Can you explain how, once you put your mission that God's called us, how God worked that with the current missionary that's there, about like you working with him and him wanting to leave the field?
Yeah, so like I said, it was one of those things. We were going about life as usual, and really when God really impressed it upon me, just in a very clear way, I was getting ready to go into work. I was getting ready to go to church, and I kind of had this discussion with God, almost argumentative. I don't recommend arguing with God, but I had a lot of questions, and then I said, okay, fine, if you want me to go, I'll go. I had a conversation with Valley immediately, and then pretty quick I went in and had a conversation with Pastor. But anyway, it was just a very sudden, clear, you need to go to Belize. And so, as I said, I had some conversations with Pastor. We started praying. I said, I don't know why God's called us to Belize. And then when I went and looked at the, just the information about it, I'm like, man, this is a small place. I kind of had the idea, if you do missions, you need to go to the biggest cities, because they influence, further reach and all of that kind of thing. Like I said, I've made 2 trips to Manila, Philippines. Metro Manila has 30 million people in it, and you can put all of the population of Belize, if you wanted to, you could put all of the population of Belize in the mall in Manila. It's called Mega Mall. It is the largest mall in the world, but yeah, I was like, man, this is a small place, small population, and so we were at that point. We had shifted our prayer from, we had shifted our prayer to, well, why Belize? And what I was asking God at that point was, if you want us there, show us why. Show us what the situation is and what that would look like. And so we started praying that way, and things were moving forward. And Pastor and I was moving forward with this to the point that we were like, well, we need to announce to the church, because the information's going to, get out. It wasn't going to stay contained with just our conversations. And Pastor told me on a Sunday morning, he was like, yeah, he's like, I think we do need to talk to the church. He's like, let's tell them today. I'm going to tell them today. And I said, oh, okay. So let me go tell my wife and daughter. I pulled them to the side. I said, if you've got any reservations, you need to speak up now, and I'll tell Pastor to hold off. But we're about to announce today. And they were good. They gave me the thumbs up. Pastor makes the announcement we let the church know, and then the next day, I created a page on Facebook about Belize, and then told that we had announced to the church, God sending us in this direction. And within 24 hours, I got a message on Facebook from a missionary that we support in Ecuador, and I've been to his church in Ecuador. That was a long time ago, 05. I went down there and visited him. Anyway, he sends a message on Facebook, and he says, you need to talk to this pastor in Florida. He's got a missionary in Belize, and you need to talk to them. And again, you question sometimes. Obviously, God was in this with the call, but I don't know about this pastor in Florida. It's not that I don't know him. I just didn't know if God was in this conversation. And so I was like, okay, I appreciate the thought. I didn't think too much about it. I didn't hurry to pester that pastor. And then me and Pastor Allenbaugh started getting other phone calls and messages and people. And I got to looking, I was like, all of this is centered around that same missionary in Belize. Maybe I need to call down there and find out what's going on. And so I called the pastor in Florida. He put me in contact with the missionary. Let me see. Yeah, so he put me in contact with the missionary. I talked to him on the phone. He told me kind of what the situation, what the need was. And so I said, well, I'll see you next week. And I got off the phone. I told Pastor, I said, hey, I need to book a ticket. I need to go down there. I hadn't planned to go to Belize that quickly, but I said, we need to go down there because I need to talk to him. And so when we got down there, he was explaining, what the situation was there with his church, with the ministry that he had been at for the last 20 years. And I'm just going to keep it really short in this hour and say that, it was just a strong need, and they've been praying for 3 years for God to send somebody down, for God to call somebody to Belize. And I said, well, I was needing God to tell me why I have this very strong call to Belize that I can't really, I'm a very logical person. I want to be able to understand it. I was like, wow, God couldn't make it any more clear. 3 years they've been praying for God to call somebody. And so I did that. We got back. I talked with Valley and with Pastor. And so now, typically deputation and raising funds to go and do missions overseas, typically people are saying it takes 18 to 24 months to get everything in place and be able to do that financially. I'm a little bit aggressive, but what we're praying and asking God for is that we can get it done in 12 months because the work there, it needs the help as soon as we can get there. And so that's what we're praying for, and I'd ask if y'all would join us in praying in that direction. When we finish the official live stream, I'll give a couple more details. Okay? All right, any other questions? Yes. Okay, so when I talk about a team, that ministry that I've been connected with for years in the Philippines, and the missionary that started that work, he came to our church when my dad pastored in Troy, Alabama. He came to our church. He presented his ministry to go to the Philippines then, and he's a missionary kid, so he had grown up in the Philippines. But I remember as a kid, and as a pastor's kid, you get to sit in on, the unofficial conversations. You go to lunch, you go to dinner, and I was sitting there one time just listening to my father and him have a conversation. It wasn't a presentation, but I was just sitting there listening, and one of the things he said, it stuck with me, all of these years, and he was talking about how he wanted to develop, hundreds of pastors and missionaries for the sake of the gospel. And you hear somebody talk about vision like that, and it's like, I don't know, but it stuck with me. Just his passion for that stuck with me all these years. And then we got reconnected back, I guess that would have been 3 or 4 years ago. We got reconnected, and I actually worked with him for a year. I was his assistant, and I kind of followed him around the globe for a little bit. But in Manila, they have built this ministry. And one of the things that they did in this ministry that they have is they used martial arts. I was talking about the Taekwondo, but a guy that he actually started the largest gang in Manila when he was young. He got saved, and he started this martial arts ministry. And so he would train kids in martial arts because they all come off the streets. They come out of gangs. They want to fight. But he would teach them martial arts, and he would teach them the Bible, teach them the gospel. And so that work in the Philippines has a lot of pastors now and missionaries that were once in the gang, and, they came out of that. And anyway, they are, at this point, that work in the Philippines, the vision that my friend has now is that they are taking teams of missionaries to go and to plant churches in all of the countries that border the Indian Ocean. So you've got the Philippines and Southeast Asia there. They're already going into Cambodia. There's a team right now. They're not set up long term. They go in and out. But there's a team right now in, where live streaming? Pakistan. Anyway, but they are going throughout the Indian Ocean with teams of Filipino missionaries. And so when they go into a country, you've got pastors, you've got